June. I'm Kevin Hoare, and I'm here with Senator Lynn Finley. And I just want to take a moment as we start to recognize that this is also, I believe it is the 79th anniversary of D-Day, the D-Day invasion, which at great cost, the largest such invasion in history ever conducted by anyone, that tens of thousands of soldiers sacrificed their lives to to give us a chance to liberate all those countries in Europe and roll back and defeat the Nazi Third Reich. And all we ask in return, unlike anyone else who's ever come to Europe and conquered an opponent, an enemy, there is we just ask for enough land to bury our dead. And I think today is a good day just to remember that, because in talking to younger people, they actually don't know anything about it, like
No,
nothing.
and Kevin, thank you for reminding me of that. I mean, this is a day to honor the people that gave it all.
Yeah,
And if you've ever seen any footage or video of all the cemeteries in Europe, it's kind of mind-boggling.
yeah.
I'd love the honor someday to go see those in person. I've toured around Arlington, but you go to Europe and you see those and you think, oh my goodness, those folks gave it all for us.
They're vast cemeteries,
Yes,
and
and tens
and
of thousands,
tens of
absolutely.
thousands. Yeah, and you know what I did too? I took the time to do something that I didn't do anytime recently, which is I went back and I watched the speech by President Ronald Reagan on the 40th anniversary of D-Day at Pointe du Hoc, which is in Normandy, and it's a moving speech. He captures, as he often did with his great communicator
Oh,
abilities,
yeah.
what, and he was surrounded, because this is a long time ago. He was surrounded by the guys, the remaining living Army Rangers that charged straight up that sheer cliff, where they had to throw like rope ladders with daggers on the end of them that would stick into the dirt, and then they would pull themselves up. And of the, I think, 225 guys that were alive that started the day to go up and take out those machine gun emplacements, and they're having grenades thrown at them and all kinds of stuff. It was vital they did that, because that was a high point where they could just shoot guys on the beach that were still coming in. Only 92 were alive at the end of the day.
Wow.
And
That's sobering. Wow.
yeah, and those are 18, 19, 20-year-old guys that, gave their futures. So
Wow.
we could actually take for granted that this even happened, which I know I'm not going to let myself do that. It's on my bucket list, by the way, to go there
Well,
and
it is
see.
mine as well. Except I hate to travel to Europe for any reason at all, but I would like to do that sometime.
Yeah, this would be one of the places definitely to put on the list. And as you said, it's amazing and impressive. A friend of mine said that for her it was really almost like a religious experience just to see this and
Oh yeah, absolutely.
realize the enormity.
Yeah, I mean, I've toured. I've spent several hours walking around in Arlington before, Arlington National Cemetery, and that's pretty darn sobering as well. So,
Yeah, I was there actually just a few weeks ago.
oh, cool.
My nephew was graduating from Georgetown and um, graduate school, and my other nephew, his younger brother, was there for that, and we got away for a couple hours and saw the Marine Corps National Monument, the Iwo Jima lifting of the flag at Iwo Jima, and then walked over to Arlington National Cemetery and made it just in time to see the Eternal Flame. I always like to see that with the
Yep.
Kennedy family, and then 5 minute walk from there. Caught the 5 o'clock changing of the guard.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I've done that very same trip, and it's pretty sobering.
It is, yeah, yeah. It was quite something. There was a monument there I did not expect to see. Didn't even know it existed. And I lived in the Netherlands for 9 years, working for different companies back in the 90s. But apparently, the country of the Netherlands um, uh, donated a monument that's like, it's a large metallic thing with big bells at the top, and it was put there to commemorate the liberation on May 5th, 1945, of the Netherlands from Nazi occupation. And that meant a lot to me to see it, because I lived there for 9 years and I knew a lot of people, and there were still people alive who would come up and just say, I know you had nothing to do with it, but thank you anyway.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. And they got their country back. They lost it, which that's quite a sobering experience too. And it's why we do what we do, to try and keep people aware of these things and to talk about what's going on in Salem, because these people sacrificed everything. Some people lost their countries, and really, as Reagan also said, freedom is only one generation away from extinction. You don't pass it on in the bloodstream. You've got to communicate it and share it, and you also have to use it. That's one of the best ways I think we can honor those who served and gave everything, is to use this system to its fullest.
You can never forget that. And thanks for bringing that up. That was cool. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to have you on today. I know that things are pretty challenging in the state Senate, but on the other hand, the hotter the fire, the stronger the steel. You guys are standing up, putting your finger in the breach of what is, suffice it to say, kind of a travesty, the way the people who are running our state have decided to run things, and they don't listen. They don't want to negotiate. It's their way or the highway. And you guys said, well, you pushed us too far. And
and that's exactly right. And people keep asking me, says, why am I doing what I'm doing? Well, first of all, when it was brought to our attention, and we have an incredible staff in the Senate Republican office, they researched and says, wait a minute, there's a law that was pushed out in 1979 that says all bills must be readable by the flesh readability scale or something similar to an 8th grade level.
Yep.
And so we ran these bills through, and guess what? They weren't even close. They had to have a score of 60. They were 60 out of 100. They were in the scores of 5 or 7. And I took an oath of office that I hold very sacred, and it says I will uphold the Constitution and the laws of the state of Oregon. This is ORS 171-134 that says they must be readable. And so we asked, please make these readable so we can move forward. And they refused. And then after a couple hours, the legislative council, who works for the Senate president, come in and says, by the Senate acting on them, they automatically become legal. And I said, that's not good enough. That's the ORS 171-134 does not say that we can act on it and all of a sudden, poof, it's legal. So I said, no, you have to fix it. So we said, we're not going to deal with any more bills until you let us fix them. And I've put in amendments to fix bills, and they were rejected. I put in amendments where I fixed them and says, please incorporate my language because it meets the flesh readability scale. And they said, no, we write those bill summaries. Nobody else does. And they're good. And they're not. So we said, well, that's not acceptable. Now, there's some bills out there that nobody likes at all. I really hate those bills. The bills to remove parental rights is absolutely insane. But the first thing is, let's make them legal. I mean, I'd be happy to debate somebody on the floor anytime, any place on the merits of measures and a fair and open discussion, but it has to be legal. So I've been accosted. Well, that's probably a strong word by some media, and says, well, we checked your bills and they're not legal. And I says, because I relied on the same legislative council to develop my bills that everybody else does.
Yeah.
And when I checked, I tried to amend them and was denied. So, that's the bottom line. They got to make them legal, and then they're terrible bills. I mean, I think if the public knew, if they're written with the flesh readability scale that nobody understands, so they say, well, this isn't that big a deal. And it is that big a deal when you look at it and say, we're going to take the parental rights away for every Oregonian. And I said, well, I don't think that's the right thing to do. I mean, that's just wrong on every level. And they said, well, we're going to have negotiations with you to get you back in the building, but the thing that you dislike most, we're not going to talk about. It stays the way it is. And, you know, when I look at things, that's not negotiation. That's your way or my way or the highway. And we chose the highway. And they never thought for 1 second that we'd be out 52 days. We were fully prepared to do that. So they accelerated the calendar to get past 10 because they thought when they got to 10, we would all cave and come back because that means that theoretically, according to ballot measure 113, we can't run for office. We think that's challengeable. But someone asked me, well, you got to 10. And I says, my oath of office is more important to me than my job. I mean, my oath of office is my word. I have to look in the mirror every day and say, I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. And you know, years from now, because one day you won't be in office, everybody will be doing something else one day. Looking back, you can look back at what you stood for and what legacy you left. And I think this is something they didn't expect. They didn't expect highly principled people to actually be occupying these offices. They expected, I think, that you guys also could be intimidated by some combination of pejoratives from the Senate president and the media playing a little beat down on you guys. And I saw some of the recent articles here where I think it was in the Baker City Herald. They actually did cover you, saying that you heard from a lot of folks, and with just a handful of exceptions, people were encouraging you to do what you're doing, because I think actually it can be argued that you're doing exactly what your job is.
Yeah, well, you know, I would tell you, and in that article, I stand by that. And I was referring to residents of my district because I get a lot of letters from people that can see I-5 from their backyard.
Yeah.
And they're not very nice to me. And I just discount those because I work for 147,000 people in Eastern Oregon. And that's who I work for. And the majority of them like what I'm doing, not all. But, you know, I have to look at the person I need to satisfy most of all is the person I see in the mirror every morning. It says I'm actually doing what I'm supposed to do, and I can feel good about it. Do I like what we're doing? Absolutely not. Would I much rather be working on these bills and moving things forward? Absolutely. Have we given the Democrats plenty of options to do that? Yes, we have. And they say, no, we're going to deal with this bill first. And, you know, so there is a budget continuing resolution that has been passed that says on the end of the fiscal year on June 30th, the state does not run out of money. State agencies will not be out of money. They will be able to continue operating at the same service level they had for the last quarter of the last biennium until September 15th. Yeah. So the premise that, well, we're going to shut down the government is absolutely not true. And they know it, but they're still rolling that out. There's, you know, they're kind of running around and saying, you know, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. Well, we're not doing our constitutional duty to pass a budget, perhaps. Maybe we will. I hope we do. But we're also not doing our constitutional duty if we don't follow the law.
Yeah.
You know, and the Constitution says the bills must be readable. They don't say the flesh scale. This says it must be readable, and they're not. So.
And they're long bills, right? I mean, I think HB 2002, one of the ones that's in focus, is like 90 pages or something.
Yeah, I mean, and all it has to comply with is the summary. So when an average person reads it, they can understand what it means, and they don't. So then they come to the opponents come to me and say, well, we passed ballot measure 113 that says you have to do that. And I said, well, have you run the flesh scale on ballot measure 113? Because it fails as well. I believe that people voted for it not knowing fully what the intent was.
Yeah, same for there's a few others like that. I think measure 114, a lot of the
same way. Measure
110. What could be a better
that's the classic example. So,
yeah.
Yep, the classic example of, you know, there's three most recent ones that, you know, they hoodwinked the public. And then the big machine sold it and people thought it was the right thing to do, and it was not.
In fact, when you talk about measure, I think you are skating to where the puck is going, because this stuff that people are being told has to happen, and then they don't actually know what's in the bills because it's not discernible without a graduate degree in gender studies or something like that. they're gonna really appreciate that you kept another Measure 110 surprise from happening to them because of something.
I absolutely believe that. So, yep, and when you look at, they call it the reproductive health bill. It's not the reproductive health bill. This is the remove parental rights and give them to the state bill.
Yep.
And I'm not going to go there. I'll never support that by any measure.
Yeah. Families come first. And
absolutely.
And also they have done things that will make it easier for sex traffickers to get away with potential rapes and
Yep.
trafficking minors. And then, of course, above all, I don't think they campaigned on the idea that a 15-year-old, a minor, could give consent to have their genitals removed.
That's exactly right. There, and I called them on it when we had in the Ways and Means Committee. I said, so you're telling me that a 19-year-old is too immature, their brain is not developed to go buy a gun, but a 15-year-old can have gender reaffirming surgery? I said, what's wrong with that photo?
Yeah.
I said, you can't have it both ways.
And they're actually saying, aren't they, continuously, that those same folks that can make this decision at age 15 but can't purchase a firearm because they're not mature enough, also, no matter what crime they commit, no matter how heinous it is, they should be let out of jail now.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but I just don't go there. I just can't. So
yeah, no,
and I absolutely do not believe, and I challenged them on that. Is they ran on that, and that's why they were elected in the majority. Well, in the Senate side, they had the majority by about 1,500 votes.
Yeah, not much.
And I might remind you that currently there's about $750,000 of illegal campaign contributions went to the Democratic Party that probably bought those votes.
Oh yeah, that's more than enough to buy 1,500 votes.
And you've seen this morning or late last night, the Oregonian put out that the Secretary of State is now perhaps under federal investigation. They're probably going to convene a federal grand jury to look at misgivings and misdoings of that. I mean, that's just the graft and corruption that's prevalent, and they're trying to get away with it, and we have to hold them accountable.
Well, there was a classic. It was put out by the Senate Republican caucus. Was an interview that Rob Wagner did with the Senate president did with Ken Bodie. I think it was on Coin 6 News, and he asked him what about these bags of cash and the contributions from these groups that are now, one of which has led to the resignation of the Secretary of State. And it's a group that apparently owes millions of dollars in back taxes, federal and state. And somehow they're still expanding, but bags of cash.
And they're still getting permits from the state of Oregon to operate.
What's
wrong with that photo?
Yeah. The bags of cash. He's just kind of, I think that's when there was like a glitch or something, you can see like, and he didn't know what to say. And then all he could think of was, well, I don't know much. I don't really know anything about that, but I'm following the news reports on. It's like, dude.
Yeah, he got a bag of that stuff. So
I just, they should have a little bit more humility about the circumstances. And you're right. There's a federal investigation will sharpen the mind on this, because I think they need to find out where the bags of cash came from. There's just
and I clearly hope that they do.
Yeah.
And I have no faith that the Attorney General will. Obviously, the acting Secretary of State won't, because she already said, we're going to reduce your fine down to from $35,000 to $15,000.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that photo?
Money, and you keep the rest of the money.
Yeah. What's wrong with that photo? So,
well,
there's a lot wrong with that.
It is totally a jaw dropper that they're going to keep $500,000, which clearly was done. It was.
I think it's a Class C felony.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe it's a Class C felony, and I certainly hope that the feds look into it, because you can't count on the AG to do that.
No, and you know what? There's something interesting about the AG that she doesn't have time for this. She is busy suing Fox Corporation, Fox News, because she's claiming that the board of Fox News was allowing people to report misinformation about the 2020 election. I'm like, we're in the middle of a crime wave here.
Yeah.
And we've got an attorney general who doesn't have any time to investigate these massive scandals, which she recused herself from investigating because, golly, I guess there must be some skeletons in that closet.
Well, I think she has taken some of that money and she's contributed some of that money. So, yeah, she's pretty well embroiled into it herself.
So this is what passes for justice in the state of Oregon right now, and they're like, "Well, you guys are so unreasonable for walking out and failing to allow a legislative session go forward when they won't comply with the law." And we're being lectured by people who do know very little about complying with the law.
Yep, that's exactly right. So it's kind of frustrating. But I would happy to say that the Republican caucus in the Senate is strong. We're together. We talk every day. We're still actively engaged in negotiation. I mean, Leader Knopp spending 4 or 5 hours a day in discussions trying to figure out how we can get a path to move forward. And as long as the Democrats keep saying this bill's off limits, we have no path. They need to recognize the fact that if they want to pass bipartisan budgets and bipartisan pact bills and do the right thing, and then they just need to move those aside and let us do what we're supposed to do.
And all the stuff they said that they haven't gotten to, they're trying to blame on you guys. Again, massive case of gaslighting because they didn't prioritize those things.
Yeah, you go back and say, who runs the agenda? We do not. We don't have very little input into the agenda. The calendar, the agenda, they run it all. And, I seen Betsy Johnson, and you can say what you want about Betsy, but she's a dear friend of mine. About a month ago, about 3 weeks ago, she was interviewed on Portland TV, and she said, they never used to run these terrible bills this early. Yeah. It's their own fault for doing that. They should have waited because they caused this. They knew when they do that, they run that bill out there, that we were not going to accept it. And they knew once we said the legitimate reason to not, and they just says, no, we can just wave a magic wand and make them legal. They knew that wasn't acceptable. But then they say, well, we're being obstructionist. I don't think so. They're trying to follow the law, and they won't. They are not.
That's right. They baked this cake. This is what they did. And I think they thought they could bring up those bills early on because there was no chance of even a protest walkout, which would have been less than like 10 days or something that could have affected those bills. They're like, well, we'll just bring it up now. There's nothing they can do about it. And you got to love how they're just totally wrong about you guys.
We shocked the heck out of them. They can't believe we did what we did. And I've told them, I've had meetings with them, and they said, well, we will give you all the things, pass all your bills. We'll give you all the money in your capital construction project. I says, I'm not for sale. The answer is no. I mean, I'm not going to sell out my colleagues. I'm not going to compromise my values. And my projects will either be funded or not funded based on their merits, which is what I would expect them to be. And my bills will either pass on their own. I'm not going to come back for favors. I'll come back when you comply with the law.
Yeah, which a novel concept. Lawmakers are complying with the law.
Yeah, that is kind of weird. I mean, go figure that one. So,
well, and I noticed that I was just reading an Oregonian editorial, and I don't know. Sometimes the Oregonian editorial board has had nuggets of wisdom in recent times, but then I think they always go back to their instincts, which is now they're kind of portraying this as saying, well, there's all these important things that our state has to address, and they rattle off what they say is a long list of crises. Tens of thousands of people living in or on the edge of homelessness, severe shortage of behavioral health services, mental illness and substance addiction, lack of public defenders, ongoing drought, low literacy proficiency among students, and many other intractable problems that need attention from Oregon's elected leaders. But I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, then that would have been a good argument for what they should have prioritized.
Why aren't you doing that? So
Yeah.
let's also do a little recap. The Democrats have been in control of Oregon leadership for 4 decades. I mean, we're in a hell of a mess. Guess who's been in charge?
Yeah.
They have. Guess who could have run all those priority bills and got all those things done months ago? The Democrats. They chose not to. So they sat around and said, we're going to have a bipartisan session singing Kumbaya for a couple of weeks. And then they started slamming with all these things that are just unacceptable.
Yeah.
They shut down our entire agenda. We brought every bill. We come back to try to pull them straight to the floor. They all went down by a party line vote. So, yeah. So these bills all could have been passed that they're saying are such draconian things that we must do. They could have been done weeks ago.
And this
not to.
This editorial, here's the jaw dropper statement. Quote, HB 2002 is not at all controversial, unquote. I mean, it's laughable on its face.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that the Democrats know that this is controversial. So who are they fooling by saying this?
Yeah, that is insane. I mean, that is insulting to think that Oregonians wouldn't recognize the issue with that if they really knew about it. I mean, that's crazy.
And now they do. I was talking.
Now they do.
Now they do.
I think when the Archbishop in Portland writes a letter, says, this is really a bad bill. We should not do this. I mean, and they don't write letters very often like that. They're typically not overly political, but they read the bill and they said, boy, this is really bad.
Yeah.
And he's
yeah.
right.
That should certainly raise their awareness level. Now, when you talk about bad bills, so the last time you got to be on with us a number of months back, that was that early session Kumbaya stage, and I know we were both hopeful that the bill that you had put forward, Senate Bill 647, which is going to prevent local governments from prohibiting natural gas use in or available for new or existing residential or commercial buildings. And it was meant to address what was actually trying to be done in Eugene, which at the time hadn't passed yet, but it has. And now it's going to be referred to the ballot. There's going to be a big battle this November in Eugene where the voters get to decide whether they agree with the city council or not, and maybe change the city council while they're at it in one of the races.
One could hope.
Yeah, one could hope. And it was a very clean, simple bill. I think this one did meet the 8th grade test here.
Well, I haven't run it through the flesh scale because I don't want to waste the time, but it was pretty simple and straightforward.
That summary is about 17 words.
Yeah.
And I understood it instantly. That one didn't get a hearing, right?
Nope, did not get a hearing. I attempted, I lobbied, I talked with the chair at length, and I said, just give me a courtesy hearing so we can get people to come in and talk and give their points of view. And I was not successful.
So this one you guys did around the 11th of April. You put forward a motion to withdraw it from committee, which would have pulled it to the floor in the Senate so it could at least get debated on the floor. People would have to go on the record voting which way they wanted to on that bill. And then it could go on to the House if it passed and still proceed at that point. That motion to withdraw from committee failed on a party line vote. And folks, when you think about the election last fall, this was the ayes are 13 and the nays are 15. It was a party line vote. And you just change one Senate race, and that is a deadlock vote.
Yep.
And that one race that really came down to just hundreds of votes was the one that Senator Meek was
he won by 400, give or take a few votes. Yeah.
So this is important to remember, right?
Pardon?
It's important for folks to remember that 400 votes in one Senate district, and really there were some other close races, can make a difference.
Yep, there's 147,000 people in each Senate district, and he won by 400 votes. So, yeah, I mean, that was one darn. I wish my cousins would have voted or something. So, yeah, And that's a sad thing about. So they're running around saying, "Well, we have a mandate. We're dealing." I don't call 400 votes a mandate. I don't call 17 to 13 a mandate. So I believe, and I still absolutely believe. I mean, I work for 147,000 people in my district, and I represent their interests to the best of my ability. And my district, for the most part, the majority of my district does not like these actions. I've heard from a lot of my constituents, and I think it's unfortunate that the Democrats are trying to hide behind their so-called mandate and run stuff, which is their check agenda and not the people they represent's agenda.
Yeah, and I actually think that this bill was, if it, let's say it was a ballot initiative and went to the ballot, I have a pretty strong feeling that people actually want to be able to have natural gas in their homes.
I absolutely do. And the problem is I seen an article last fall sometime. I was watching the Portland TV when I was over here, and the Portland School District was remodeling a school. And the Portland School District has a policy to switch to electric and get away from natural gas. However, when they were doing the school remodel, he says, "Nah, we're not going to apply that policy now because natural gas makes too much sense. It's a better heat source. We can do better with it. It's cheaper. It's cleaner." So they ignored their policy and put in natural gas. The thing that I spend a lot of time on energy issues, because on the Energy Environment Committee, I have attended, pretty high level energy trainings and conferences. And we do not have in the Northwest an adequate supply of electricity to go around to do all this stuff, nor do we have an adequate transmission capability to move it if we did. So if everybody went out and bought a electric car today and every home converted from gas to electricity, they couldn't do it. We would be brownouts because we don't have the power. We don't have the ability to wheel the power around. But we do have adequate natural gas, as Lori Shaw just said. Thank you. And we have the infrastructure in place to do that. The appliances today are 98% efficient.
Yeah.
So we're not seeing big plumes of black smoke coming out of them. So, I mean, it's just insane to think it's the right thing to do. I mean, we need to do much better.
And people like to cook with gas.
Oh, yeah.
They like
I personally converted in my home. I live outside of town, so I don't have natural gas. I have propane, and I converted my stove in my house to a dual fuel. And so I have propane burners and an electric oven. My wife just loves it.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out how to cook with it myself, but it's the best heat source there is. I don't have soot running up the walls. I mean, it's just, it's insane to think that. I mean, it's insulting because the technology is so much better than it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago. We have very efficient, and it helps the grid because we do not have the grid to support where everybody wants to go. And I've had multiple conversations about how this conversion going. I says, well, first of all, said when we passed this bill to set all these aspirational goals of electricity, said we didn't pass anything to allow electric lines to be put in. So all these people want to do this stuff, but they can build these renewable facilities, but they can't move the power out. It can't hit the grid.
So it's not a transition from carbon to clean. It's a transition from reliable to unreliable.
That's exactly right. I think last summer, I believe it was last summer, the end of June, I was over here in Oregon City for a golf tournament, Republican golf tournament. And it was 95 degrees. It was incredibly hot. And Tigard was suffering from brownouts. I mean, they had rolling blackouts because they didn't have the power for everybody to turn their air on. So serves them right.
And all they do is tell us, well, then you have to use less. That's what you have to do.
And don't plug in your cars today, even though you may have to go someplace tomorrow, because we don't have the power for you to plug in your cars. So,
and who knows this? Crazy. You know who knows this? Just like you were saying with the Portland Public Schools, who knows this is unreliable and needs to have a backup plan? Governor Tina Kotek, because the governor's mansion got natural gas to run a backup generator way back in February, at the very time that they were saying that they had to have all this stuff, and you and I and the rest of us were not supposed to have it.
Yeah. It's
She's
kind of
going to make
ironic.
governor's
I've heard that. I've not seen that, but I've heard that very thing. And that's a little bit hypocritical, I believe.
Yeah, it was. I just posted the link to the article there, and it's pretty clear that it's what she wanted to do. And the Wall Street Journal editorial board cited in this article too, of warning coming blackouts in America, because we're outpacing. We're not only going from reliable to unreliable, but we're converting from affordable to unaffordable, which is at a time with inflation like it is. You're fighting the good fight by trying to make sure that people have these energy options. I think that's really important.
It's kind of funny. We had the Ways and Means Road Show the month of April, and I was fortunate enough to talk them into. They came to Ontario for the Ways and Means Road Show. So theoretically, 20 legislators came to Ontario. Well, it was kind of fun to listen to them. Said, how are we going to get there? It's 400 miles. My range is only 2. Where can I stop and charge? Then we're borrowing gas cars to come over. And I thought, welcome to my world. I don't have an electric car because it's 377 miles from my house to the state capitol.
Wow.
I do not stop and charge up my car. I may stop and gas it up. It only takes me a couple minutes, but yeah. So yeah, it's not practical.
Yeah. And I think they think, as you said, people that can see I-5 from their back window, those folks don't understand the rest of the state. And I was talking with Representative Ed Deal yesterday. A lot of these things that they're doing and they're saying, and the way they're treating many of the legislators like yourself who represent rural Oregon, you're representing a range of counties that are not places frequently visited by the folks that represent the Willamette Valley. You're Baker, Crook, Grant, Harney, Lake, Malheur, parts of Deschutes and Jefferson counties is what it says on your legislative website. And no wonder that we've got 13 counties that want a divorce from the state and go join Idaho.
It's an incredible frustration level on the people's part. And I understand that, they say they're not adequately represented. I take a little exception to that because I think I'm doing my best. But, that I know that they're not meaning me, but, the people, the majority party, the Willamette Valley, both north and south, they don't care about rural Oregon. They think they can get all the food they need by going to Safeway because it's right there on the shelves. It doesn't have to be produced. So you try to explain that to them and their eyes just glaze over and they say, kind of like Charlie Brown's teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So.
Well, but sometimes they're more clear about their hypocrisy. I thought that a nice asterisk on the end of this, trying to pull Senate Bill 647 to the floor of the Senate back on April 11th. We were talking before the show, and I noticed that there was a statement that was posted by the chair of that committee, who you work with and found a lot of ways to work with in common ground, but she would not give you a hearing on this. And she posted a vote explanation. I think it's good to draw folks' attention to this, because after she talked about, she says, as a mom, grandma, environmental advocate, and current chair of the Senate Energy and Environment, I am passionate about protecting our environment and health of our communities. My vote against this procedural motion was not a vote against the merits of Senate Bill 647 or any other of the bills the Senate Republicans attempted to remove from committee. So she had a beef with the process, she said. Making a motion to move a bill directly from committee is a procedural maneuver that undermines our democratic and legislative process. It advances bills before they have been properly vetted by experts and the public. By attempting to bypass the legislative committee process, we are essentially shutting the door to the public. When bills are in committee, Oregonians can weigh in about how these policies could affect their communities and their everyday lives. This won't happen if they bypass the committee process. How are they going to weigh in on a bill that they can get a hearing?
There's always been an unwritten rule until this year. If you're a member of a committee, which I was, and you submit a bill last September, or early, well before the session, which I did, you will always get a public hearing. Guess what? I did not get a public hearing on Senate Bill 647. So none of these experts that knew all about this issue, and I had a lot of them lined up, that wanted to speak, were able to come lay their case and make their point on why it's not a good deal to eliminate a fuel source. And so, yeah, that's pretty hypocritical on her part.
Yeah, and it's gaslighting. It's blaming you for something that she caused and said that she wasn't going to allow to do. And she uses, I think, what she hopes is an ignorance by the public that somehow people had a right to speak out and be heard on this bill when no such thing happened. This is important to remember because this is just one bill, right?
Yeah,
this repeated itself hundreds of times in this legislative
we pulled 72 bills to the floor. We attempted to. None of them made it. But it is a procedural move that is in the Senate rules that is allowable to do. And that's if it weren't in the rules, we wouldn't do it. But it says, yeah, if you want to pull a bill directly for, you may do so. And here's the process. We went through the process. We notified the Senate president the day before. We want to pull these bills to the floor. And we did. And we lost by a party line vote.
And I think it really stands out that you guys really did give this a try all the way up until the moment when that was it. They went too far and they thought that they had you guys as a controlled opposition. They could just force you to comply. And you said, no, we're not doing that.
Yep.
And I think this is a good and important lesson to them. They should have prioritized the things that are truly priorities. They didn't campaign on doing all this stuff. And as you said, they claimed they had a mandate. They had no such thing. They had a narrow, razor thin majority. And
now there are some districts that they got all the votes. I mean, downtown Portland, there's not a Republican that ran in some of those races or were viable candidates, But they had no mandate. You're exactly right, Kevin. So, yeah.
Now, there are some bills still floating around out there, and I think it's important for folks to know that these bills, which also relate to this same subject of climate, energy, and so on, these bills would probably start to move potentially if you guys just came back and said, okay, we're done. That was enough, and we're just going to let stuff happen. We know there's a lot of other bills, including the HB 2002 and 2005, but these are just the climate ones. There's one that goes out of its way to change the name of the Oregon Global Warming Commission to Oregon Climate Action Commission. And it's sitting there waiting in Ways and Means to be moved, which it potentially can be, I believe, if it's in Ways and Means. And they want to direct the Department of Environmental Quality to essentially become an enforcer for all of the gas emissions and all of the things that we've been talking about. So they're going to empower that group. And then here's the 4 bills that I know we were watching last time we talked. They all relate to something called resilient, efficient buildings. And there was
868, 69, 70, and 871.
Yep. And those bills are all essentially trying to rewrite the building codes of the state, or at least change them in such a way that what's being done in Eugene is very likely and extremely easy for all these other jurisdictions to do around the state. It handcuffs them, actually.
The fiscal on those bills are hundreds of millions of dollars. And the answer is, well, we will be able to put a little money and then go get all kinds of federal money. I had a nickname for some of those bills. The first nickname I had was Heat Pumps for All, and they wanted to, 60,000 heat pumps out there. I mean, I figured the cost of like $400 million. And I thought, this is not viable.
Yeah.
So.
And they are complaining, well, we just don't have the money to make sure there's enough defense attorneys. So we have to release people from jail. And we just don't have the money to go and provide behavioral health treatment, addiction services to all of these folks that are rushing into the state from other states to do hard drugs under Measure 110, no consequence.
We don't have enough money to fight fire.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, this is the typical. We don't have enough money, but we're going to pour gasoline on the problem, and yet these bills are sitting there poised to move. They're very vague, by the way. I noticed that they lack a lot of detail because um, they essentially just say relating to, and it's about these goals, right? These broad goals. Don't these bills often just get handed to the bureaucracy who then write a zillion rules?
Yeah, that we write the bills and then the agencies get them and they write the rules, which is scary. I mean, the rules are where we really. Then you have to go back and say the legislative intent was X. You wrote it for Y. You have to go back and fix it to X. But agencies just run roughshod. They do what they want to do, and we try to hold them accountable.
Well, this is important. That's exactly what you guys are doing. You're trying to hold your colleagues that are running the Senate and running the legislature accountable. By the way, where is Tina Kotek? Because I thought she was going to make sure that she got people working together and got things done. Was this what she had in mind?
She met with leadership a few times and then said, "Now I think you guys need to work it out between you. This is a legislative issue, and there are three branches of government: the executive, legislative." And so she backed away. Well, and she made 5 or 7 meetings, and we said, "Here's our case. Fix this case, and we'll be happy to do stuff." And then she realized that she was probably cooking around some areas that that's a legislative issue to deal with. So
she didn't know anything about the legislature. Huh? So I don't know why she didn't spend more time.
Can you imagine when she was speaker if the governor tried to get into her sandbox?
Yeah, that's true.
That would work so well. So,
yeah, no, that's true. Well, it feels like that this painted a picture today of just how important it is what you guys are doing, how principled it is, why it's important for people to understand these very long, complex bills that sometimes are so vague too that they leave it open ended.
They're vague on purpose.
Vague on purpose.
And I guess what I would say, Kevin, is that I've been accused of, I get hundreds of emails. Go back and do your job. You're messing around. I still spend between 8 and 10 hours a day in the Capitol. I've missed very few committee meetings. The only thing I'm not doing is being in the Capitol between 10:15 and 11 o'clock. I'm not providing quorum. I've met committee meetings. I met with constituents. I meet with lobby. I meet with interested people. I meet with agencies, and I advocate and do stuff. Everything that needs to be done. I'm just denying quorum because they won't fix and make bills legal and the correct thing to deal with. So.
By the way, I forgot to mention, usually David Darnell would be on with us today, but he wasn't able to join. He forgot that actually his, I think it was his cousin or nephew has a high school graduation. There are many of those going on right now. But one thing David likes to say all the time is do not comply. I think when they're ordering you to do something and you are a free person representing people in this case who want to be free, just not complying with somebody ordering you to do something is maybe the most important thing you can do. And I want to say thank you for standing up for us, because you're standing up for everyone. I know that you've got your district, but there's a lot of us
No, I'm an Oregonian. I mean, it's my goal to make good laws for all Oregonians. And so, it's frustrating. We put in for an excused absence because I'm exercising my First Amendment right to protest. They're denied. Mm-hmm. When we first started this, the Senate president accelerated the calendar and says, we're going to meet 7 days a week. So the first time anyone can remember, we had a 4-session schedule for Sunday. I put in an excused absence so I could go to church. It was denied.
Jeez.
So I put in an excused absence for a couple of days next week because I'm honored to speak at a fallen police officer's memorial, and I'm going to do that. If I'm unexcused, I do not care. I'm going to go represent my community and speak at this police officer who gave it all. He was killed in the line of duty in April, and I'm just going to be there. So, this is a hostile place to be right now. I mean, There's no appeal process when we get an unexcused absence. We can't appeal it to anybody. We get no rationale on why. It's just they want us to come back and roll their agenda, and we're not going to do that. They need to make them legal and lawful, and then we'd be happy to have a conversation, but they're not willing to do that. So.
Well, this is a great example too, because I kind of think that our opposition, like they kind of worship government a little bit. They put that on the highest pedestal. That's the most important thing. I think that's why they didn't actually think you guys would walk out and stay out, because for them the most important thing is trying to get and keep and increase power and control over the citizenry and over the government. And God forbid, why would I ever consider not doing more of that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And I think they've forgotten that maybe it's more about the constituents. It should be, which I appreciate you doing that.
It's more about the people we represent. That's all there is to it. I represent Oregonians, so yep, and I'm damn proud to do it.
Any last things you want folks to know about what's coming up in the coming weeks? Ways that they can maybe show their support and maybe even help you and the other senators that are taking this strong stand.
There's an incredible smear campaign out right now, orchestrated by the majority party through agents. I mean, they're running TV or radio ads against me in my district, and I think, actually, it's radio stations outside my district they help broadcast in, because the stations in my district aren't running them. And then I'll turn in, the next thing you know, I'll see 150 emails show up, says come back, do your job. They're all form letters. I mean, that they're orchestrating.
Yeah.
If you're dissatisfied with the way things are going, let the majority party know that.
Yeah.
Flood their inboxes and do their thing. Let them know that you're not satisfied with what they're doing, that they should make a legal, lawful operation and follow the law.
That's good. And they can all get that information just by going to the Oregon legislature.gov. They can find everyone's contact info there. Isn't that right?
Yep, absolutely.
Well, keep us up to date and informed on what's happening, and anything that you need from us and from the people that follow our show, and the many folks that just want to stay in the know.
Kevin, thanks for what you do. I mean, I certainly enjoy this. I was so happy to see your text the other day. I'd love to do this anytime I'm around. I'm available. I would be happy to participate. These are a great forum, and I enjoy it. So thank you so much.
You make it worth it, what you're doing, and hats off to you. And I just, like I said, just let us know what we can do to support you. And thanks again for taking the time to be on with us. And we'll be watching.
All right, you guys all have a good day. And thanks for everyone for participating. The pleasure of your time is absolutely appreciated.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you, everyone. Please share this show with everyone you know. There's a lot of folks that need to hear this and get involved, because that's the best way you can show respect for those folks that today sacrificed everything on D-Day in 1944. Thank you, and we'll see you all tomorrow on the next episode.